In 2018, Jessica Simmons was a 34-year-old seasoned police officer working in the Phoenix Police Department. After serving over a decade on the force, she had developed a reputation for being methodical, dedicated, and highly reliable in critical situations.
She was a trusted officer, a figure of authority sworn to protect and serve, but beneath the uniform, Jessica Simmons harbored a dark secret, one that would unravel in the most horrifying way. What began as a forbidden attraction spiraled into an obsession so deep, it led to betrayal, murder, and the destruction of everything she held dear. This is the story of how a single moment of desire turned a life of duty into a nightmare of unimaginable consequences. Our story begins in 2018 with Jessica Simmons, a respected officer known for her dedication and composure under pressure, but beneath the surface, her life was unraveling, driven by a secret obsession that would soon shatter the very foundation of her world. What started as a forbidden attraction to her partner's husband, Nick, would spiral into something far more dangerous, a deadly game of betrayal, jealousy, and murder. By the time the truth surfaced, the line between protector and predator would be forever blurred, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Jessica Simmons was a 34-year-old veteran officer with a reputation as unbreakable as the handcuffs on her belt. Jessica was the embodiment of law and order, her file reading like a greatest hits of police work, commendations for bravery, citations for excellence, and a solve rate that made detectives green with envy. But beneath the polished badge and starched uniform lay a woman of flesh and blood. With desires and weaknesses she kept locked away as tightly as the criminals she apprehended. Jessica's dedication to the job had cost her more than one relationship, leaving her with a growing emptiness she couldn't quite name. With over a decade on the force, she thought she'd seen it all, done it all, and survived it all. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Enter Laura Mitchell. At 32, she was no fresh-faced rookie, but a seasoned officer with her own impressive track record. Where Jessica was all hard edges and steely resolve, Laura brought a perfect blend of empathy and street smarts to the job. Her green eyes sparkled with an enthusiasm for the work that many officers lost after a few years on the beat. As Captain Rogers introduced Jessica Simmons and Laura Mitchell, neither could have anticipated how intertwined their lives would become. The pairing was meant to balance Jessica's seasoned experience with Laura's fresh perspective. In those early shifts, things went smoothly. The two quickly found a rhythm, handling everything from routine traffic stops to more tense situations with professionalism and ease. Together, they navigated the challenges of the job, earning respect from their colleagues and building a bond that, to the outside world, seemed unbreakable. But beneath the surface, something far more dangerous was beginning to brew. Over the next few months, Jessica and Laura became the department's dynamic duo. They cleared cases at an impressive rate, earning commendations and the respect of their peers. Late-night stakeouts and post-shift drinks fostered a deep friendship between the two women. They shared their hopes, fears, and secrets, forming a bond that went beyond the badge. For Laura, Jessica became more than just a partner. She was a confidant, a sister in arms. She saw past Jessica's tough exterior to the loyal, fiercely protective woman beneath. Many nights, as they sat in their patrol car watching the city sleep, Laura would imagine their future together on the force. She pictured them rising through the ranks, maybe even making detective one day, always watching each other's backs. Laura saw their partnership as a lifelong bond, a friendship that would withstand the test of time and the dangers of their profession. Little did Laura know that her partner, the woman she trusted with her life, would become the architect of her demise. As autumn leaves began to fall in October 2018, Laura invited Jessica to dinner at her home. It was meant to be a small get-together, a chance for Jessica to meet Laura's husband, Nick, and share their war stories. Jessica agreed, more out of politeness than genuine interest, but fate had other plans that night. Plans that would set in motion a series of events ending in betrayal, gunshots in a darkened warehouse, and a partnership shattered beyond repair. The moment Jessica laid eyes on Nick Mitchell, something stirred deep within her, a hunger she thought she'd long since buried. And in that instant, the foundation of trust and loyalty that Laura had so carefully built began to crumble, though she wouldn't know it for months to come. Throughout dinner, Jessica found herself hanging on Nick's every word, laughing a little too loudly at his jokes. She caught herself stealing glances at his strong hands and kind eyes, imagining what it would be like to be held by him. As the night wore on, Jessica's attraction to Nick grew stronger, fueled by the wine and the intimate atmosphere. When it was time to leave, she lingered at the door, reluctant to break the spell. On the other hand, without knowing better, Laura looked around the table with a heart full of contentment at the sight her home, filled with laughter, wine, and shared stories. Here was her husband, the love of her life, getting along so effortlessly with Jessica, the partner she trusted above all others. In that moment, Laura felt truly blessed, unaware of the tempest brewing just beneath the surface of her perfect world. They toasted to partners and to friendships that last a lifetime. Jessica echoed the toast, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as guilt and desire warred within her. As their glasses clinked together, the sound seemed to reverberate with a finality that only Jessica could hear, the death knell of a partnership, a friendship, and a future that would never come to pass. What followed would be a descent into obsession, betrayal, and murder that would leave no one unscathed. "It was great meeting you, Jessica," Nick said, his voice low and warm. "You're always welcome here." Those words would haunt Jessica in the months to come as she found herself making excuses to spend more time at Laura and Nick's home. What started as innocent visits soon turned into something more sinister. By early 2019, Jessica and Nick had begun spending time together without Laura's knowledge. It started with innocent text messages, a funny meme here, a work-related question there. But soon, the conversations turned flirtatious, and the lines between friendship and something more began to blur. According to reliable sources, one rainy afternoon in April, Jessica stopped by the Mitchells' house, knowing Laura was working a double shift. Nick greeted Jessica at the door. He informed her that Laura wasn't home, his voice carrying a husky tone. Despite that, Jessica, her heart racing, stepped inside, fully aware of Laura's absence. What happened next would be the point of no return. In a moment of weakness, fueled by months of pent-up desire, Jessica and Nick fell into each other's arms. Their passionate encounter was brief but intense, leaving them both breathless and guilt-ridden. As Jessica left the house that day, she knew she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The thrill of the forbidden affair quickly gave way to a gnawing sense of guilt and fear of discovery. She and Nick continued their clandestine meetings, stealing moments of passion whenever they could. With each encounter, Jessica's obsession grew, as did her resentment towards Laura. Laura, oblivious to the betrayal happening right under her nose, continued to sing Nick's praises and confide in Jessica about her happy marriage. Each word was like a dagger in Jessica's heart, fueling a toxic mix of jealousy and desire. As summer turned to fall, Jessica's mental state began to deteriorate. The weight of her affair with Nick and the constant presence of Laura gnawed at her conscience. She became distracted at work, snapping at colleagues and making careless mistakes. Her once stellar performance began to slip, but it was a seemingly ordinary night in November that would push Jessica over the edge. Responding to a domestic disturbance call, she and Laura entered a dimly lit apartment. According to reports, they separated to search the rooms. Jessica heard Laura's panicked cry for help. Racing towards the sound, Jessica burst into the bedroom, her gun drawn. What she saw made her blood run cold. A large man had Laura pinned against the wall, his hands around her throat. Without hesitation, Jessica fired 2 shots, dropping the assailant to the ground. As the adrenaline faded and backup arrived, Jessica watched Laura being comforted by their colleagues. In that moment, a dark thought crept into her mind: how easy it would be for Laura to disappear, to be taken out of the equation permanently. From that night on, Jessica's obsession took a sinister turn. She began to fantasize about a life without Laura, a life where she and Nick could be together openly. These thoughts consumed her, poisoning her mind and twisting her once strong moral compass. As winter descended upon the city, Jessica's plan began to take shape. She meticulously studied the patterns of criminal activity in their patrol area, looking for the perfect opportunity to stage a tragedy. Every shift with Laura became an exercise in restraint as Jessica fought the urge to act on her dark impulses. The opportunity finally presented itself on a cold night in March 2020. the police radio crackled to life with a 911 call. As the call came through, Jessica felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the moment she had meticulously planned for months, the moment everything would fall into place. Her heart pounded, but her exterior remained calm and composed. She glanced at Laura, watching her partner's every move, knowing this would be their last time together. Laura, unaware of the betrayal looming, instinctively rested her hand on her holster, ready for action. The sight of Laura's trust, her readiness to face danger beside her, stirred a brief pang of guilt in Jessica. But that guilt quickly dissolved under the weight of her growing obsession. Her desire for a life with Nick drowned out any lingering doubt. This was her moment. There was no turning back now. As they approached the convenience store, the night air was thick with tension. The street was eerily quiet. Jessica's heart raced as she realized this was her last chance to back out, to choose loyalty over betrayal. But the image of Nick's face, the memory of his touch, pushed her forward. They entered the store, guns drawn. The scene inside was chaos. Overturned shelves, broken glass, and terrified customers cowering behind the counter. In the confusion, Jessica made her move. She deliberately maneuvered herself and Laura into a vulnerable position, seemingly pinned down by fire from the robbers. Then, in a moment that would haunt her forever, Jessica turned and fired 2 shots, not at the suspects, but directly at Laura. Jessica's performance in the aftermath was Oscar-worthy. She fired several more shots in the direction of the fleeing suspects, ensuring they escaped. Then she rushed to Laura's side, her voice cracking with perfectly feigned panic as she called for backup and paramedics. All the while, she was carefully setting the stage for her crafted story of a robbery gone wrong. As the ambulance sped away with Laura's body, Jessica stood in the parking lot, her uniform stained with her partner's blood. The flashing lights of police cars painted the scene in surreal shades of red and blue. She had done it. She had removed the obstacle standing between her and the life she craved with Nick. But Jessica's triumph was short-lived. The cracks in Jessica Simmons' carefully maintained facade began to show almost immediately after Laura Mitchell's death. In the aftermath of the crime, the initial shock of losing a partner masked the truth, but it wasn't long before inconsistencies emerged in Jessica's story. What should have been a clear-cut case of a robbery gone wrong began to unravel under the scrutiny of a detailed investigation. Internal affairs, at first sympathetic to a police officer mourning the loss of her partner, slowly turned skeptical. The details Jessica provided about the position of the shooters, the trajectory of the bullets, and her own movements during the chaos simply didn't add up. Laura, an experienced officer, had inexplicably ended up in a vulnerable position, a fact that gnawed at the investigators. How had this happened to such a capable officer, and why was Jessica's behavior in the days leading up to the murder so erratic? Surveillance footage further complicated matters. It didn't align with Jessica's account of the night's events, raising even more questions about her involvement. Whispers started circulating among colleagues, rumors of Jessica's strange behavior, her obsessive attachment to Laura's husband, Nick, and the way her demeanor had shifted in recent weeks. The investigation was closing in. Each new piece of evidence tightened the noose Jessica had unknowingly tied around her own neck. The guilt of what she had done, the life she had stolen, and the trust she had betrayed began to weigh on her. The dream of a future with Nick, once so vivid in her mind, now seemed like a distant, unattainable fantasy, forever tainted by the blood of her partner. It wasn't long before Jessica found herself in an interrogation room, facing her fellow officers, her once confident demeanor shattered. The room was suffocating, the air thick with the tension of unspoken accusations. Now, with the eyes of internal affairs fixed on her, she felt the walls closing in. They had everything, the details she'd tried to bury, the lies she'd told herself would hold up. A stack of printouts is placed before her, showing intimate, damning exchanges with Nick. And then came the final blow. A stack of papers was placed on the table in front of her, printouts of text messages between her and Nick. The evidence was undeniable. The flirtatious messages, the emotional confessions, the moments where her jealousy seeped through, it was all there, in black and white. Every dark thought, every forbidden desire that had driven her to kill Laura, laid bare. Jessica had no way out. She could feel the weight of her lies crushing her from within. The affair, the obsession, the cold, premeditated plan to eliminate her partner, all of it was exposed. With nowhere left to turn, Jessica broke down, confessing to everything. The truth spilled out like poison, tainting every word she spoke. The revelation sent shockwaves through the department. An officer, someone who had sworn to uphold the law, had murdered her own partner in cold blood. It wasn't just a betrayal of Laura. It was a betrayal of everything Jessica had once stood for. Nick, meanwhile, found himself caught in the eye of the storm. He had been oblivious to the depth of Jessica's obsession, believing their affair was a fleeting escape from the mundanity of life. But when the truth came out, when he learned that Jessica had killed Laura to be with him, he was overwhelmed by guilt and disbelief. He wondered how he had let things get this far. As the investigation into Laura's murder deepened, Nick's own involvement came under scrutiny. Investigators dug through text messages, phone records, and surveillance footage, tracing the affair from its innocent beginnings to its deadly conclusion. Nick had been a pawn in Jessica's twisted game, used and manipulated to feed her obsession. The final blow came when Jessica confessed to him directly. They had met in a parking lot late one night, her face pale and frantic. She admitted everything: the affair, the jealousy, the murder. Nick stood frozen, his world crumbling around him. The woman he had once been drawn to, the one he thought he could control, had spiraled into something far darker than he could have ever imagined. Recording her confession was his only option, a way to protect himself from her further manipulation. Handing over that recording to the police was the hardest thing Nick had ever done. His hands shook as he passed it to the investigators, sealing Jessica's fate and his own. He had loved Laura, but in the end, his betrayal had set the wheels in motion for her murder. The guilt would follow him for the rest of his life. For Jessica, the trial was inevitable. Overwhelming evidence and her own confession sealed her fate. On May 24, 2021, she stood before the judge, no longer the proud officer she once was. She was broken, her life shattered by twisted desires and terrible choices. As the life sentence without parole was read, she caught a glimpse of Nick in the gallery. His face reflected disbelief and grief, the weight of their shared destruction heavy between them. Led away in handcuffs, Jessica's mind wandered back to where it all began. If only she had resisted temptation during that first dinner at Laura and Nick's home. But regrets were pointless now. The damage was done, and there was no undoing the consequences of her betrayal. The thin blue line, once a symbol of honor, had become her undoing. It had exposed her crimes, tightening around her neck like a noose. Nick's life, too, was forever altered. Though not imprisoned physically, he was trapped in his own personal hell, haunted by Laura's ghost and the role he played in her death. He would carry the weight of that betrayal for the rest of his life. Jessica had lost everything: her future with Nick, her career, her very sense of self. Every day in her prison cell was a stark reminder of the life she had destroyed, the trust she had shattered, and the partner she had murdered. She was no longer the officer who once walked the streets with duty and authority. She had become hollow, consumed by her own darkest impulses. Her story wasn't just one of murder, it was a cautionary tale about unchecked desires. Jessica's descent into darkness serves as a chilling reminder of how fragile morality can be and how obsession can drive even the most principled person to ruin. In the end, Jessica Simmons didn't just destroy lives, she obliterated trust and the very idea of loyalty. In her cell, she was left to confront the specters of the lives she destroyed, including her own. The true cost of betrayal is not just the immediate consequences, but the slow erosion of the soul. Jessica Simmons thought she could control everything: her passion, her betrayal, and the lives entangled in her web of lies. But in the end, her desire for power and love destroyed not just her partner, but herself. The life she imagined with Nick crumbled into a nightmare she could never escape. Now, behind bars, she's left to face the truth. The ultimate betrayal comes with a price she'll pay for the rest of her life. If this story left you shaken, share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales that dive into the darkest corners of the human soul.